When we talk about creative flow, it's tempting to frame it as something mystical, as if inspiration drops out of the sky and lands on us by accident. But what's really happening is far more concrete, rooted in the structure and chemistry of your brain. The fascinating thing about flow is that it isn't about adding more to your mind. It's actually about what turns down, what quiets down, and what opens up when the brain shifts states. Most of the time, especially in our daily routines, we live in a state of heightened prefrontal activity. This part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is the seat of self-monitoring, self-criticism, and that inner narrator that never seems to stop commenting on what we're doing. It's useful, of course. You need that voice to plan, to regulate behavior, to think strategically, but the same circuits that make you cautious also build hesitation, doubt, and overthinking. They keep asking, am I good enough? Will this work? What if I fail? Now imagine what happens when those circuits start to quiet down. In flow, neuroscientists call this transient hypofrontality, a temporary downregulation of activity in the prefrontal cortex. It's as if the volume on that inner critic gets dialed back, and suddenly there's room for a very different kind of cognition to emerge. You stop thinking about yourself, and instead, you become immersed in what you're doing. The sense of time passing begins to dissolve. Minutes blur into hours, and you feel less like you're forcing action and more like action is unfolding through you. This isn't fantasy. It's not self-help fluff. It's a measurable, observable neurological event. When the prefrontal cortex goes quiet, other networks light up. Pattern recognition sharpens. Ideas that seemed unrelated suddenly connect. Motor skills become more fluid, more precise. Athletes describe it as the body taking over. Artists describe it as the work creating itself. Scientists sometimes describe it as a sense of inevitability, like the solution was always waiting for you and simply chose this moment to reveal itself. And here's the paradox. In flow, you often feel more alive and more in control than ever, but neurologically, you've actually let go of control. You've surrendered the steering wheel from the overbearing manager in your brain to the deeper, faster, more instinctual layers of the nervous system. You're not overthinking anymore. You're simply responding, creating, moving in a rhythm that feels both effortless and powerful. This is why so many people describe flow as a liberation. It's the lifting of a weight you didn't even realize you were carrying, the constant weight of self-judgment. And once that burden is gone, the energy that was wasted on doubt is suddenly available for creation, for risk-taking, for expression. The brain shifts from what might go wrong to what can I build right now. That is the neurological engine of flow. But don't mistake this for a passive state. Flow isn't daydreaming or spacing out. It's intensely active. Your brain is still working, but it's working differently, more efficiently, less encumbered. Think of it like a high-performance vehicle shedding unnecessary weight. The engine hasn't changed. It's the same brain, but because you've reduced friction, the same power now carries you much farther, much faster. This is why people report their best performances, their deepest insights, and their most original ideas during flow. The brain, freed from self-conscious chatter, channels its full resources into the present moment. You're not trying to create anymore. You are creation in motion. And here's the key point. This isn't luck. It's not random. It's not reserved for the gifted or the chosen. Flow is a natural state built into your biology, and it emerges when the conditions are right. That means it can be trained, it can be accessed, it can be cultivated. So the next time you find yourself in doubt, hesitating, questioning if you're ready, remember this. Creativity is not about piling on more thought. It's about learning how to get out of your own way, how to let the unnecessary circuits go quiet, and how to allow your brain to do what it's built to do at its very best. Because when the inner critic fades and the noise drops away, what remains is pure presence. And it's in that presence that your greatest work is born. If we peel back another layer of the science of flow, we find that it's not just about which parts of the brain are active or quiet. It's also about the chemistry coursing through your nervous system. Flow is a neurochemical event as much as it is a neural one. And when the right mix of chemicals is released, you don't just feel different, you think differently, you create differently, you perform at a level that feels almost beyond yourself. Think of dopamine first. It's the molecule of curiosity, reward, and motivation. In flow, dopamine surges, sharpening pattern recognition and focus. It's why ideas suddenly link together in ways they didn't before. That's not magic. That's dopamine acting like a spotlight, making certain signals stand out, illuminating connections that were invisible a moment ago. You feel it as excitement, as inspiration, as the irresistible pull to keep going. Alongside dopamine, you get norepinephrine, a chemical tied to alertness and energy. It primes the body for action, but in flow, it doesn't create panic or stress. Instead, it locks your attention onto the task at hand, tuning out distractions. You don't care about your phone. You don't care about what's happening outside the room. Every ounce of your awareness is funneled into the moment, and you feel like you could stay there indefinitely. Then comes anandamide, sometimes called the bliss molecule. It enhances lateral thinking, which is the ability to connect far-flung ideas and generate novel solutions. Anandamide dissolves rigid thought patterns, and suddenly creativity is no longer about effort. It's about allowing the brain to wander, to link, to imagine. This is why breakthroughs so often happen in flow. The brain, under the influence of anandamide, stops playing by the same old rules and starts inventing new ones. Layer onto this the soothing presence of endorphins. These natural painkillers don't just mask discomfort, they create a sense of effortlessness. An athlete in flow feels less of the burn in their muscles. A writer feels less of the strain of hours spent at the desk. You push farther, you last longer, because the neurochemistry has literally shifted your perception of effort. And finally, serotonin. This is the molecule that creates a sense of calm satisfaction when the state of flow winds down. It's what allows you to look back on the experience not just as productive, but as deeply meaningful. It completes the cycle, giving you a sense of fulfillment that motivates you to seek out the state again. When you put this cocktail together, dopamine, norepinephrine, anandamide, endorphins, serotonin, you're looking at one of the most powerful neurochemical signatures the human brain can produce. Each chemical alone has potent effects. Together, they create a state where creativity, focus, resilience, and joy converge. It's no wonder people chase flow. It's not simply that the work feels good. It's that your biology is aligning to reward you for doing your best work. But here's what's crucial. These chemicals are not arbitrary. They're not released at random. The brain is exquisitely sensitive to context. Flow emerges when the conditions demand it, when challenge meets skill, when risk sharpens focus, when novelty stimulates curiosity. The chemicals are signals telling your body, this is important, stay here, go deeper. And that's why flow is so much more than a productivity hack. It's a state where your biology is saying, yes, this matters. It's the nervous system's way of aligning every resource you have toward a single aim. That's why hours pass like minutes. That's why fatigue fades. That's why you do the thing not because you're forcing it, but because it feels like the only thing you were meant to do in that moment. Understanding this shifts the way we see creativity. It's not just an art. It's not just talent or inspiration. It's biology, it's chemistry, it's the nervous system in full symphony. And once you recognize that, you realize flow is not some rare accident, it's a state you can invite, cultivate, and return to. If we want to understand creativity in its fullest sense, we have to recognize that the brain isn't one single machine, it's more like an orchestra with different sections that need to come together in harmony. And two of the most important sections for creativity are the default mode network and the executive control network. When they're working in isolation, you get extremes, but when they come together, you get flow. The default mode network is the system that lights up when you're daydreaming, imagining, letting your mind wander. It's the network that allows you to simulate possibilities, to generate new ideas, to play with scenarios in your head. It's where imagination takes place, but left alone, it can be chaotic, too many ideas with no structure, no direction, no discipline. That's why we often lose ourselves in endless thoughts that never translate into action. On the other side, you have the executive control network. This is the system that governs focus, decision, making, and self-regulation. It's the part of the brain that keeps you on task, keeps you from being distracted, helps you organize, evaluate, and filter. It's critical if you want to turn raw inspiration into something useful, but left alone, it can be rigid. It closes off exploration, shuts down wandering, and over-polices your creativity until nothing daring can emerge. Flow happens in the rare and precious moments when these two networks stop competing and start collaborating. It's when the default mode network generates the sparks, and the executive control network channels those sparks into a flame. You're not lost in imagination, but you're not shackled by discipline either. You're riding the edge between chaos and order. And the brain seems wired to thrive exactly on that edge. Think about it like this. If you only let your imagination run wild, you'll come up with endless ideas but never finish anything. If you only let discipline dominate, you'll stay efficient but repeat the same predictable patterns. But in flow, the imagination provides the fuel and the discipline provides the steering. It's not one or the other, it's both at once, woven together. This is why so many breakthroughs feel like they come from nowhere. What's actually happening is that the default mode network is generating associations in the background, linking concepts in novel ways. And then, when the executive control network steps in, it recognizes which of those associations are actually valuable, which ones can be acted on, which ones matter. Creativity isn't a lightning bolt, it's this interplay between expansion and contraction, between exploration and execution. When you understand this, you see why flow feels so different from ordinary focus. In ordinary focus, you're holding yourself tightly, making sure you don't drift off. In flow, focus doesn't feel like strain. It feels like guidance, like your mind is effortlessly tracking with your imagination. The two networks are no longer tugging in opposite directions, they're pulling together, amplifying each other. And there's another layer here. When the brain balances these networks, it's not just about producing better work. It's about producing work that feels alive. Because you're not only efficient, you're original, you're not just executing, you're creating. And that combination of novelty and usefulness is exactly what defines creativity at its highest level. This is why people in flow often describe their work as feeling inevitable. They'll say, "It just came through me," or "It felt obvious once I saw it." That sense of inevitability is the product of harmony. The imagination produces a new pattern, and the control system recognizes it instantly as the right one. No wasted energy, no second, guessing just alignment, and here's the takeaway: you don't need to force this harmony. You need to create the conditions where it emerges naturally. That means letting your mind wander when it needs to, but also giving yourself the structure to act. It means cultivating both freedom and discipline, then allowing them to meet in the middle. Flow is that middle. One of the most important ingredients of flow is attention. Where your attention goes, your brain follows. And in flow, attention doesn't feel forced. It feels locked in, as if the entire nervous system has decided, this is the only thing that matters right now. What makes that possible isn't willpower. It's the balance between challenge and skill, the sweet spot neuroscientists often call the Goldilocks zone. If what you're doing is too easy, your brain gets bored. The mind starts wandering, the default mode network drifts off into daydreams, and there's no urgency to stay present. If what you're doing is too hard, the opposite happens. You get anxious, overwhelmed, flooded with stress chemicals that pull you out of the moment. But when the task matches your skill level just enough to stretch you, to demand your full focus without overwhelming you, something clicks. Your attention naturally gravitates to the present because the present is exactly where the solution lies. This balance is deeply tied to neurobiology. When challenge and skill are matched, the brain releases just enough dopamine and norepinephrine to heighten engagement without tipping into stress. That cocktail makes distractions irrelevant. Suddenly, the conversation in the background doesn't matter. The notification buzzing on your phone doesn't matter. Even hunger and fatigue fade into the background. It's not that the world disappears. It's that the brain decides this single activity deserves priority over everything else. And think about how rare that is in everyday life. Most of the time, we split our attention. Half of us is in the task, and the other half is replaying something from yesterday or anticipating something tomorrow. Flow demands totality. It doesn't allow for partial presence. It insists that every ounce of cognitive and emotional energy be invested in the moment. And the reward is a level of performance and creativity that feels almost superhuman. You've felt this before. Maybe while playing a sport, when your whole body seemed to know what to do without hesitation. Maybe while writing or designing, when the words or ideas poured out without stopping. Maybe in conversation, when every response felt natural and perfectly timed. In all of those cases, what you were experiencing was the power of attention fully aligned with the task. This is why flow isn't just a productivity tool, it's an antidote to distraction. In a world designed to hijack your attention with endless notifications, messages, and noise, flow is proof that the human brain can still achieve depth. It can still cut through clutter and focus with surgical precision, but it won't happen by accident. It happens when you put yourself into challenges that stretch you, demand more from you, and refuse to let you coast. And here's the paradox: the effort to get into flow often feels hard, but once you're there, effort disappears. You don't feel like you're straining to focus. Focus becomes automatic. You're not forcing yourself to pay attention. You're captivated. It's the same difference between staring at a blank wall and watching a sunset. One demands willpower, the other takes no effort at all because your biology has decided it's meaningful. That's the lesson flow teaches about attention. Meaning drives focus. Challenge ignites engagement. Skill builds confidence. And when those three intersect, the brain rewards you with a state of effortless presence we call flow. So the question isn't, how do I force myself to focus? The real question is, how do I design my life so that focus emerges naturally? Because when you learn to place yourself in the Goldilocks zone of challenge, your brain will do the rest. If flow were only something that happened by chance, it wouldn't matter how fascinating the science is. We'd just have to sit back and wait, hoping that inspiration drops on us like a lightning strike. But the truth is, flow can be invited. There are certain conditions, certain triggers, that prime the brain to enter this state more easily. And when you understand them, you stop waiting for flow and start creating it. One of the strongest triggers is novelty. The brain is wired to pay attention to what's new. When something breaks the pattern, it forces us into the present. That's why new environments, new challenges, even new ways of looking at familiar problems can spark flow. The unfamiliar demands engagement, and the nervous system responds by flooding you with the chemistry of focus and curiosity. Risk is another powerful trigger. It doesn't always mean life-threatening danger. It could be emotional risk, creative risk, intellectual risk. Anytime you step outside of what's comfortable, the brain perks up. Risk signals importance, and importance draws attention. Think about an athlete standing at the edge of a crucial play, or an artist sharing work that feels vulnerable. That edge sharpens the senses, heightens awareness, and primes the system for flow. Clear goals are equally essential. The brain doesn't like ambiguity. When you know exactly what you're aiming at, even if it's just the next step, attention naturally aligns. It's like giving your nervous system a compass. Without it, you drift. With it, Every action feels directed. And along with clear goals comes immediate feedback. The faster the feedback, the faster your brain can adjust. That constant loop of action and response keeps you immersed, prevents disengagement, and pulls you deeper into the moment. Embodiment is another trigger. When the body is fully involved, whether in movement, art, music, or even immersive work, flow becomes easier to access. This isn't just metaphorical, it's neurological. Sensory input grounds attention. When your body is engaged, your mind has fewer escape routes. You're anchored in the task, present in both thought and action, and then there's autonomy, the sense that what you're doing is freely chosen. When the task is aligned with your values, your curiosity, your sense of purpose, the likelihood of entering flow skyrockets. It's not just effort for effort's sake, it's effort that matters to you. The nervous system amplifies engagement when it senses alignment between what you're doing and why you care about it. The important thing here is that these triggers aren't external gifts. They're levers you can pull. You can design environments that introduce novelty. You can choose challenges that carry risk. You can clarify goals, create feedback loops, engage your body, and align your work with your sense of purpose. In other words, flow is not an accident, it's engineered. And once you see that, you begin to realize something powerful. You don't have to wait for flow to show up on its own timetable. You can cultivate the conditions where flow becomes the natural consequence of how you live, work, and create. That's why some people seem to find flow consistently. It's not because they're lucky, it's because, knowingly or not, they've built their lives in ways that keep hitting those switches. This means flow is a skill. Like any skill, it strengthens with practice. The more you lean into novelty, risk, clear goals, embodiment, feedback, and autonomy, the more fluent your brain becomes at shifting into the state where creativity and performance soar. And that's the real lesson. Flow isn't about waiting for lightning. It's about building the storm. When we pull all of this together, the brain shifting into a different state, the neurochemistry flooding in, the balance between imagination and discipline, sharpening of attention, the triggers that open the door, what becomes clear is that flow isn't just for rare moments. It's not something reserved for athletes in competition or artists in a moment of inspiration. Flow is a universal human capacity. It's the nervous system's blueprint for peak performance, and it can be harnessed not just in extraordinary situations, but in the ordinary fabric of life. Think about what happens when flow moves beyond isolated bursts and becomes part of how you live and work. A designer doesn't just stumble into a few good hours, they can create consistently at a higher level. A teacher doesn't just capture attention once in a while, they can craft experiences that keep students fully engaged. A parent doesn't just find a fleeting moment of connection, they can bring presence into everyday interactions. Flow isn't confined to creativity in the narrow sense. It's about amplifying your capacity in any domain that matters to you. But to sustain this, you have to treat it like a cycle. Flow demands energy. It requires focus and chemistry that can't be summoned endlessly without recovery. That means rest is not the opposite of flow. It's the foundation of it. Sleep, movement, time in nature, even intentional idleness, all recharge the systems that make flow possible. If you ignore that, you burn out the very machinery that allows peak states to emerge. The paradox is that by respecting recovery, you actually get more flow, not less. It's also about practice. The more often you enter flow, the more your brain learns the route. Those circuits get reinforced. The chemistry becomes easier to summon. What once felt rare becomes familiar, and that's when flow shifts from being a lucky accident to being a trained skill, a tool you can reach for. Athletes know this, musicians know this, but it applies equally to entrepreneurs, writers, teachers, scientists, anyone whose work demands both creativity and discipline. And there's something deeper at play here. Flow doesn't just change what you produce. It changes who you are while producing it. When you're in flow, you're not weighed down by self-doubt, you're not paralyzed by fear, you're not distracted by trivialities. You're fully present, fully engaged, fully alive. That experience has a way of reshaping how you see yourself. It shows you what you're capable of when your biology and psychology are aligned, and once you've seen that version of yourself, it's hard to go back to living distracted, divided, half-hearted. This is why flow is not only a performance enhancer, it's a path to meaning. People describe flow experiences as some of the most fulfilling moments of their lives. Not because they were easy, but because they demanded everything they had to give and rewarded them with the feeling of complete alignment. The brain's chemistry doesn't just make you more productive, it makes you feel more human, more connected to what you're doing, more in touch with a sense of purpose. Final point is this: you don't have to wait for flow, you can cultivate it, you can design for it. You can build the rhythms of work, recovery, challenge, and meaning that bring it into your life again and again. And when you do, you're not just improving your creativity or performance, you're reclaiming the deepest experience of being alive.